Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. And today we are hopping aboard the ship of the Sea Beast.
Woohoo! Never saw this one coming.
We are sailing away down a wondrous animation sea.
Yes. Only this time, there are no actual ships.
That's true. Emma cannot be captain of the relationships ships because there are none.
There are none. I mean, no romantic relationships, I should say.
Yes, there are plenty of really awesome, phenomenal, familial and friendship relationships.
Absolutely.
So,
which we love.
Absolutely. Head over heels. Love it.
It's super cute.
Oh my gosh. This movie, y'all.
This was just something that hit me out of the dark. I mean, you recommended it to me, and I had some free time, and I was like, yeah, let's try it out. And it's just one of those movies that I would have never found on Netflix if you hadn't told me, because it wasn't promoted. It wasn't there was nothing there, but it was awesome.
It blows my mind how under the radar this movie is when it is so incredibly phenomenal.
Yeah, beautiful animation, beautiful voice cast, beautiful story. Granted, a lot of the story is familiar, but it was fun and fresh to me.
Same, absolutely. It's a lot of themes and things you've seen before, given a little twist, given a little updating and tweaking, and it felt fresh and new. It was a new experience. I was thoroughly engaged the entire time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you kind of mentioned when we were first talking about this film that it reminds you of How to Train Your Dragon meets Pirates.
Yes.
And so yes, a lot of the series of events feel familiar, but it was just different enough where it felt like its own thing. And I loved it.
Yes, one of the things I love about this movie the most is, and I'll talk more about it, but it has its own sense of identity, and so it can stand on its own. You don't have, yes, of course I relate it to How to Train Your Dragon. I'm Kelly. I'm going to do that with literally everything because I love How to Train Your Dragon, and it's ingrained into my very soul. But the Sea Beast stands on its own as its own thing. It's got its own voice, and it is telling a familiar story, but in this new and rich environment and storytelling. It was just so fun. It was fun. It's a fun time.
I agree. It was so much fun. I just really enjoyed it overall. And I think the beauty of it, which we'll hit a summary very soon, folks. But I think what really stands out to me is the fact that this story is about stories told in the past and how they affect our future. It's all about storytelling. And so that's why I think it's kind of creative in a sense that they have used familiar story elements that we're already familiar with. So yes, we are oh, this feels like How to Train Your Dragon a little bit. But that's, I think, part of the point. And even if the directors didn't intend it, we hear and relate and connect so many different stories from lives of present and past, and they can affect how we see the future. And I don't know, I thought it was a really cool idea.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Okay, so you're probably wondering what the heck the story is about. We're already diving in, and perhaps you haven't seen it yourself. If you haven't, spoiler warning, of course, but if you don't want spoilers, pause and go watch it, because it's not that long, and like we said, it's super fun. So, as far as the plot goes, we have Maisie, a lovely, adorable little orphan with the cutest British accent.
So cute.
Who is living in an orphanage, and she reads stories to the kids each night about the great heroes, the hunters they call them, that fight the sea beasts, that are constantly in the ocean and constantly bring peril to the villages. And anyway, one night she escapes and she goes looking for Jacob, who is this well-known hunter, very famous for what he's done, killed 5 sea beasts in a matter of 3 days, not 4. And she seeks him out to join his crew. But of course, Jacob, being this big, brawny man, is just like, the ship is no place for a child. And of course, she somehow gets on the ship. So
she stows away.
They're on the crew. Jacob and the captain and all of the crew members, their job is as hunters is to hunt down all these sea beasts, and they actually bring back materials of the bodies to give to the king and queen, which is how they make money. And, keep the land safe, right?
Yes.
But eventually, Jacob and Maisie are washed away and get all wrapped up with the Red Bluster, which is like the big bad, right? The toothless of this universe.
Yes.
So, they're with the Red Bluster, gets stranded on an island, and somehow Maisie starts to make a connection with this red beast who, yes, she calls Red. She also makes a friend named Blue, who is a blue little sea beast, and he's adorable. We love him.
Very cute.
But anyway, Maisie makes this connection with the beast, and they eventually get the sea monster to carry them back, like be their transportation back to their homeland. And on the journey is when they realize, maybe these sea beasts aren't really monstrous. Maybe, like, we're the ones who were the monsters and brought havoc to this world. And so, anyway, through their journeys and conflict with past views of friends, eventually they get the town to realize that they've made mistakes throughout history and that these creatures are not so bad as they appear. So that is Sea Beast.
That is the Sea Beast. And as we tell that story, like, you are probably, connecting it to How to Train Your Dragon or a myriad of other stories similar to it, right? You have these two, feuding sides who have been at war for years and no one even knows why they started in the first place. It's the same story we heard so much. And then, of course, there's someone who comes and asks the question, why? Why are we still fighting? Like, what's the point of all of this? And maybe, like, it's the How to Train Your Dragon quote, we've killed so many of them and they've killed hundreds of us. And like
thousands of them, hundreds of us.
Yes, exactly. So it does feel very familiar. But one of the biggest reasons why I was thoroughly engrossed with this film, not just talking like technical wise, because I would just sit there and drool over every beautiful shot that was happening in front of me. But what really pulls the audience along are these characters. Mm-hmm. And so we have Jacob, we have Maisie, and their relationship, which is like the heart of this whole show. And it's like it's so well done and special, and it like you are rooting for Maisie and you're rooting for Jacob. Like Jacob is the hero, like, and he, like, these hunters, they are like just almost worshipped, like everyone loves the hunters. And Jacob, like, even from the very beginning, he's not just trying to, like, save the towns from the beasts, but he's always protecting his crew.
Yeah, his crew is his family.
Exactly. And so this whole, like, you're rooting for both of them. Maisie has such a, like, a spunky attitude about her, and the two of them together is so hilarious. Mm-hmm. And so, like, just taking a moment to talk about these two, like, I just feel like immediately you're, like, wrapped up in their story, and you're wrapped up in their relationship together.
Yeah, because Jacob is very much, like, he is good-hearted and wants to encourage his crew. He's there to, like, give the victory speech and everything, but he's also very practical. It's like, this is what we do, this is how we get it done. Maisie likes to quote books. She knows all those stories by heart. So she, like, as soon as she met the captain for the first time, she's like, you need no introduction.
You're Captain Crow.
Right, and you've done this and that, and lists a whole bunch of things he's done. As well as the fact that she has the background that her parents died on the Monarch, which is a ship that went down with a sea beast. And she constantly is, like, quoting the book. So she's like the book smart one. Jacob is the street smart one. Yes. And it's just funny to see their dynamic back and forth. Because especially since she's a young child as well, she's the one who has this wonder, the sense of wonder and awe. And, well, isn't this what it says about you? You're supposed to be this strong, heroic person. Or, as all good hunters say, live a great life and die a great death. You know, she lives by that. Whereas Jacob is more like, that's awesome, but, like, you don't want to confront one of those sea beasts. Like, life is a lot more difficult than you realize. You know, classic adult view versus child view.
Yes, absolutely. And but being like an adult versus a child, like Maisie can like dish it out.
Yes. She is not afraid to speak.
She's not afraid to speak, and like she can hold her own against Jacob in their banter, which is so fantastic and just like absolutely hilarious. But even when they are like bickering or whatever, like they're at the root of everything, they care about each other a lot. And like it's just, their dynamic is just so special and so fun. And what boggles my mind is like listening to a whole bunch of interviews with Chris Williams, the director. Originally, Maisie wasn't in the script at all. Like through most of like quite a big chunk of time, she was non-existent.
Wow. And
it was mostly just a story about Jacob, and like Captain Crow stole him as a baby. And like it was just about their relationship, because even in the final film here, like there is a father-son relationship between them, but in the film they went into the direction that Jacob is a survivor of a shipwreck and the only survivor, and is picked up by Captain Crow and his crew, and joins the crew and becomes a hunter, and kind of adopted. And honestly, what's like for Captain Crow, because Captain Crow, like there are a few different antagonists in this movie, but like you have the king and queen who are kind of like continuing on this cycle of violence. Like they are in the place of power, they're not going to lose their power, they're going to keep it going, right? You kind of have maybe the witch as like a scary presence, but not necessarily super deep into the story. But Captain Crow is more of an antagonist, because he's the one that eventually captures Red and takes Red back to the king and queen. And it is the loss of Jacob, or the presumed loss of Jacob, that drives Crow to that. Right.
It's that sense of like, because he is closest with Jacob, he tends to be the one in opposition to him the most. Because, you know, he sees him as family and he's like, this is what I've taught you. I expected you to be the next captain of the ship. And now you're going a different direction. Like, you're going against everything you've ever known. Like, you are so dear to me. And now you seem like you're running away from everything I've taught you.
Yeah. And I really love that dynamic. Of course, like, it's me. I love father-son dynamics. What is it? Classic. And I like seeing Captain Crow, who, you know, is shown at the beginning to be such a hero, and how any man can kind of fall into like a desperate revenge rage, I guess. You know, depending on what they lose. And so and even when he gets Jacob back, and Jacob isn't the same, and Jacob has different views now, like he is willing to basically like toss Jacob aside. Like it's just, I really am interested in Captain Crow's entire like arc. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, when someone's insecure, it can cause them to be blinded as well.
Yes.
You know, and we see these movies where like people go into a fit of rage or jealousy, and we can sometimes like laugh at it and like, oh, why would anyone ever go to that extent? And maybe some of them are, you know, hyperboles. But most often it's not totally wrong. Like when you are completely like flustered or angry because either something's out of your control or you're very insecure in a certain area, it's amazing what your human brain will convince you to do.
Yes.
And for him, like seeing Jacob turn the other way was like a dagger to his heart. And so it's like, if that is the one true relationship I have, because he can't depend on the relationships of his crew. Not that he doesn't care about them, but I mean, when you're on the crew, you could die the next day, right?
Yeah.
But Jacob is his son figure. And so that's like the one true relationship he holds on to. And if that's gone, it's just like, what do I have?
Exactly. Like, even thinking back to, he goes to this witch for this poison, and the hunters don't use poison. Like, they, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like not part of their code, I guess. It's not part of their, like, histories. And so it's kind of a taboo to do that. And the crow asks the witch, like, what's it going to cost me? And the witch says everything. And so it's almost like, well, he's lost everything, because at that time he thinks he's lost Jacob. And then he's like, well, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then to even like have him back and and just be like, it's almost like Jacob returns, but it's not triumphantly, because Jacob is not the same Jacob that left.
Right. He's different.
Oof. Oof. And so, like, I love Jacob. I love that it takes him time. It takes him time to, like, Maisie is right away, like, nope, Red is actually trying to help us. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And
they had that hiccup and toothless moment where the touching of the hand, right?
Yes, it's so good.
They have one of those eye contact moments, and like, oh, I understand you. And of course, Maisie's the only one who can talk to Red, and Red understands.
Yes. They have a deep connection. And Maisie being so ready to accept that as reality. I mean, it does take her a little bit too. It takes her, a step. She takes a step back about it, because she spent her entire life reading these books. But like, it's fascinating to see Jacob's progression of learning to trust Red, and like just realizing the world off of his ship is so different than the perspective of being on it. It's just like that I don't know if you know that chair exercise where you have one person who stands on a chair and another person who like lays their head underneath the chair, and then you have each person describe what they can see. And it's like, no matter how hard the person who's standing on the chair tries, they cannot see underneath the chair. Like, you have to get into a different position to be able to see the rest of the world and to understand it. And this is Jacob finally like getting off the chair and getting underneath the chair. Right.
He's getting a new perspective of the world, and Maisie is super helpful in bringing that perspective, because Maisie is really fearless in everything she does. Like, she takes risks, and like whether it's like jumping on the ship or whether it's just like having that moment of connection with Red and not running away from it, standing up to the crowd in the very end, like, she just goes for it. And I think that like makes Jacob think a bit more about what he's doing.
Absolutely. I love good relationships like this, where these two very stubborn people like change each other. And it's so sweet.
It is so sweet.
Oh my goodness. So let's talk about the ending really quick. Just like the overall themes of like, Red is taken back to the castle, and Maisie's putting the pieces together. Like, oh, like, this really might not be our true history, and this history has been like spread by the royal family, and all of these books that I've ever read are all like,
they all have the seal of the royal family. So you find out that, yep, it's the royals who have written all of the history books, all of the storybooks. So they are running this ship.
Yes. They are telling people what to believe, and this has become reality, even if it's not reality. And so Maisie like stands up for that, and helps Red escape, but also stands up to the king and queen and to the into all of the people gathered there, and it's just like, here's the truth. And there are two things I really love that she says. One is that, like, as a daughter of two hunters who died for their fight, she says, like, there's this really, really climactic moment at the end where she's like, the king or queen or one of them is like, you know, who are you to be telling us this and all these things? It's like, well, she yells, like, I have every right to be, like, you know, upset. And I love that line. It just, like, jars you. And it's so raw, and I really love that. And then also, my favorite line in the entire movie, you know, you're looking at these hundreds of years of history, and even her parents who have died for this cause, and looking at Jacob, who all he wanted to do was protect people, and she says, you can be a hero and still be wrong. And I love that line. Like, that is the tweak, that is the fresh take on this story, is that it isn't just, you were wrong, you're a bad person. It's you were wrong, but you were doing it, like, but I recognize your intentions.
Right.
And that's so different from anything at least I've experienced in this narrative.
Yeah, no, I found that really powerful as well, because the first time she brings that up is when her and Jacob are traveling. And Jacob I think he's actually looking through one of her books that she brought along, and he's just like, oh, you know, they talk about this village that was completely wiped out by this sea monster, and, you know, I've been past that cove multiple times, and there's no sign that there ever was a village. And he's like, maybe, like, what's in these history books is not completely true. Like, and he starts to think, the wheels in his head start turning of, like, maybe what I believe isn't entirely true, and maybe what I am doing isn't right. He starts to question that, and that's when Maisie brings up that line, which it is so powerful because her parents also were hunters. And so I love it because it's not saying, let's blame each other for the horrible things we've done. It's saying, like, no, let's educate ourselves because we've been ignorant for a long time. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault. I mean, there is a root of the problem, of course, but, like, you know, over time, people just believe what they've been told or have been raised to believe certain things and just didn't know any better. So just this idea of, like, let's not just fight because we do, but let's look at all the sides of the story and understand why we are doing what we're doing. Oh, this is false history. We should end this. Like, it's just learning to break out of that ignorance that they've lived in. Because, like you said, they had good intentions. Like, Jacob was trying to just protect people because he's been told his whole life that the sea monsters are bad, and he's had experience fighting sea monsters who've attacked him. So, like, that's what he believes. But that's because they didn't have the foundation of the calmness that sea monsters present, and they're just being their usual selves in the water. Like,
right.
Because the time that he's been alive, they've already been attacked over and over and over again. So that's just their new lifestyle. Exactly.
There was no space to ever just experience a sea beast naturally. It was always, you are an automatic enemy no matter what. Right. Because that's what's ingrained in their brain, but also what's ingrained in his experiences. And just that, like, Jacob had the openness to accept that as well, you know, and to realize, oh, this is wrong, and the bravery to be like, yeah, I was wrong. I spent my whole life doing the wrong thing.
Right. That's such a courageous move. I mean, you have characters like Captain Crow who, like, live in that anger because his whole life he has been torn to pieces. Like, he has different prosthetics because of these creatures he's fought. So, like, that's all he sees them as, is the enemy, and things that cause pain. And so, like, he is one of those people who is not open-minded. And so, and part of that is because of his experience. And, like, I mean, I love this conversation about this theme because it's just so applicable to, like, our world, like, and not even just recently, like, always. You know, there's always been, like, teachings of history or otherwise that have been wrong. And many different eras, or even in the last couple of years, whatever, like, a lot of people just didn't know any better. And it's about learning how to stand up and do our research and figure out why we believe what we believe, you know?
Yeah, and it's about getting off the chair and going underneath the chair for a little bit, or listening to people who are underneath the chair.
Right, learning to listen and learning to admit that we were wrong, and learning to have compassion when we had good intentions but didn't know any better. Like, it's just that, like, let me humble myself for a moment and understand what life is like in this person's shoes or this person's shoes, etc.
Exactly. Again, this film just feels like perfect for the moment, and yes, just incredibly universal. And so to me, it feels like this could be an instant classic for any, like, you know, library of animated films.
Yeah, and I think the theme is the biggest part that separates it from that How to Train Your Dragon complex. Like,
Yes.
I mean, yes, it's very similar with the beasts and humankind connecting. But, like, How to Train Your Dragon is about mending that relationship. And then they all live together. And then in this case, they don't live together. They're just like, oh, these are the natural things of the world. Like, let's try seeing things a different way. And I don't know, it's just a very fresh take. But still feels fun and adventurous because of the setting the story's in.
Yes.
Like with the pirates and everything. Like, it just,
Yes.
it feels like old story, but still like such a new idea.
Exactly. And let's just dive into the vibe, okay? The tone of this film, the art of it, and, like, I have so much to say about, like, we've talked so much already about just how fantastic the story is and the characters are, but even if that wasn't the case, this film is phenomenal because it looks gorgeous.
It's beautiful. That's why, like, I still am shocked that it wasn't promoted at all. Like,
it blows my mind.
Like, I would not have seen this film if you hadn't said anything. And it's beautiful.
It's so good. Like, every, like, design of every location, every character design, like, the color keys for every shot, the cinematography, just how the camera moves. I am in awe of this film.
It is so good.
It blows my mind. So, like, it's just every single moment is so clearly, like, every single person working on this film has put such extreme care and attention to every single detail.
Yeah. I mean, I especially love the action shots because there's a lot of action happening in this film because they're fighting off sea monsters on a ship, right?
Yes.
And there's, like, this one scene in particular in the beginning when Jacob is trying to rescue a bunch of people on the ship because the sea monster has tangled himself around the boat multiple times. It's a really long one. And the boat is, like, tipped on the side. And there's just all this movement of Jacob, like, going from place to place to try to save, you know, the guy who plays the bagpipes or, like, the other person across the deck. And, like, the camera just follows him the whole time. It's not like, here's a shot, but it follows him, and it's so fun. Like, it, you know, it's kind of like those videos where you watch a roller coaster and you're just on the roller coaster the whole time.
Yes. The camera moves are fantastic. Like, it's just like I could pause at any moment, and the cinematography and the, like, framing of everything is great, but then, like, just playing everything through, like, the camera is always moving in super interesting ways. Like, this is shot like an action film. Like, it is an action adventure. And it's so unlike anything like that recently. Like, it feels so different because of that. And because, like, Chris Williams, the director, was given so much support from Netflix to keep pushing the boundary. And, like, I wish I had stats on, like, how much this movie cost, because it had to be insane. And, like, the another one of the interviews I listened to, like, he was talking about how he would keep kind of, like, asking for more from Netflix of, like, we want to do this thing and this thing. Can we do this? And Netflix would just keep saying yes. Like,
sure.
Like, absolutely, you can do this great big, like, action sequence. Like, let's do it. Let's go. Like, I am, like, yeah, it just makes me very excited for other things Netflix is working on. Because, like, it's just so refreshing to... I love Disney shows. I love Disney movies. I love the people who are working on Disney films, obviously. But Disney is so restrictive in terms of because they are so monolithic, they have such extreme pressure to fit into a very tight box. This is what people expect out of a Disney film. This is like, Netflix feels like more, and it obviously it's just as huge, but, like, maybe not quite us, but, you know, like, it's still a big company, but it feels like they're more willing to do things and take risks and go in a different direction and let creatives do what they want.
Sure.
And this film is so good. Okay.
It's so good. Like, another action scene I was thinking about is when Jacob and Maisie pull into the island where the Red Bluster has taken them. And there's this whole scene of, like, Jacob and Maisie attached to each other by a rope and, like, swinging from the nose of the blaster, basically. Yes. And it's like there's this back and forth, and then Maisie's on a tree, and then he's on the ground, and then he's up in the air, and then she's on the ground. Like, there's this constant, like, moving pattern between them, like, attached by this rope. And I loved watching that scene again, because it's just, like, yeah, this constant movement happening. Yes. I have to point out one thing that I would love to, like, touch on real quick while we're here is... you know, you talked about just how beautiful it is, and there's this moment where the king and queen are like, okay, hunters, you're not doing as great a job as we want you to. So we're going to have our Admiral Eric over here and the Royal Navy, like, drive this ship in and capture it themselves. And it's like this gorgeous, intricate, beautiful boat that it's just like, oh my gosh, like, I just thought it was stunning. And then it was also just humorous because the hunters were very practical minded and were like, yeah, you're never going to catch anything with that.
Yes, but every single moment, every single detail, like, and that goes back into, like, the different settings. Like, I'm truly just in awe. Like, the castle itself, right? When they're at the castle, like, it's completely different than, you know, it's all these blues and golds and, like, very intricate, like, shell designs and, like, gorgeous. And then the ship itself, like, that has its own rustic, weathered, worn, very, very detailed setting design. And every island they go to is completely different and is just, like, it makes you feel like you are actually in a world that exists.
Right. Yeah, like one of the towns they're in where they're just home for the night, and they're just all at the tap house or whatever, like, getting ale, and, like, it's just so, like comforting and fun, and, like, you think, like Old Village, like, I don't know, I think of Hobbiton, but, like, you know, just like that, you know, very, like, we're here as people, just being people, like, and there's shanties playing, and I love that atmosphere. I love
it. It truly, yeah, just every piece of it makes you feel like you're in a bigger world out there. And again, so much attention to detail is so gorgeous. I have so much to say about the animation, and just that a lot of this coming from the Chris Williams interviews that I listened to, and I'll say too that, like, Chris Williams was the director for Bolt and Big Hero 6, and he's been a story writer and artist for Raya and the Last Dragon, the Frozen films, Moana, etc., 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 like all the way back to Mulan. So he has basically been working at Disney his whole life, and he wanted to do something different. He like even talked about how he wanted to get outside of the Disney limits and like do something more adventurous than Disney is willing to do. And so he was able to make that happen, and he really, really enjoyed it and like get out of the regular Disney tone. So one of the things that, of course, like I have talked a lot about on the podcast is water animation. This film is all water animation.
Yep, they're on an ocean.
They're on an ocean most of the film, and I like my jaw was on the floor by the end of this movie with how beautiful everything was. And like there's especially one little tiny scene, and this is true throughout the whole thing, but the one that like sticks in my brain is Blue, the little cute sidekick sea monster like pops out of the water and flops onto the ship, and the water animation in that one little moment is phenomenal because like the water comes out and like splashes on the deck and changes the color. It looks so real. Okay. And then there are moments where the camera is panning and the ocean is spraying against the boat, and you're just like, is this a live action movie? What is this? And Chris Williams said about having a movie with a lot of water in it, and I quote, "I don't recommend it."
It's a lot of work.
Yes. And the physics of a boat on water, talk about a challenge. Like everything is a challenge. Like, and everything is different from the animators, the camera operators, the textures, the lighting. Like everything is different when you have it's a boat on water. Like,
yeah. And you got to take into consideration how that boat moves, how people move on a boat, like all those pieces.
All of those pieces, like, and the lighting reflects on the water, and like every little thing, and it is done so well. Like I am absolutely like head over heels about how beautiful every shot looks.
Yeah, it's stunning.
I cannot. There's two things about the boat, technically speaking, that he also talked about being very challenging. One was the sails, which I thought was interesting, and like it also came as a surprise to the team. It's just like, how do the sails interact with the wind? And like every scene, they wanted to make sure the ship was moving accurately due to the wind. And so they actually didn't get the sails and the wind to work until like really late in the process, like almost too late. But then they finally figured out like whatever computer physics thing they did programming wise to make it work, they were able to do it. But like those are things that you just don't even think about, like because like I rack my brain, I'm like, I don't know. I just don't have like, is there another 3D animated film that has like ships this much? And you know,
yeah, the only thing I can think of is like How to Train Your Dragon and Brave. Their boats have sails.
Right. Like there are ones that have little snippets of boats with sails. But to this degree.
Yeah, for this one, it's for a lot of the film. So I don't know that there is.
And the ships are doing all sorts of different things.
Right. They're being turned upside down, you know, all different ways.
So I thought that was interesting, of like, that's definitely like a programming challenge that they didn't anticipate, but then were able to like make look really good.
Right.
And then the other thing that you wouldn't even think about are all of the ropes.
Oh, sure. I suppose like ropes do have a certain texture to them.
They have a certain texture, and they have a certain movement.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
Like ropes. So, and he worked on Moana, as he was talking about this like difference of like, in Moana, the ropes on her boat almost always like sank the whole movie. And with hundreds, like you're amplifying the problem exponentially with having hundreds of ropes on this giant ship. And so that was one thing that they did attack early on in the process, and so by the end they were able to like create their programming physics engine to work with that. But because ropes can, you know, be pulled taut but also have like buoyancy to them, it was just a completely different thing they were used to working with. And because there are so many ropes on the ship and the ropes just have to move with the boat in certain ways, wild. This is why I love animation. Because every little tiny thing that you see on screen has to be thought about and created and specifically like programmed to look normal.
Right. If you have a live action ship, like, and there's wind in the sails, like the sails are going to do what they do and the ropes are going to do what they do. But in animation, you have to create it.
You have to create it.
You have to make it happen.
You have to make it happen. Like everything has to be planned and created. Every little detail.
Every detail.
And that's what boggles my mind.
Another animation piece that I found beautiful, or rather another setting I should say, was the tropical island where all the sea monsters kind of have their abode. I just loved it because it was so vibrant, like so many like poppin' colors like left and right. That was super fun. And that's where you meet Blue, who his blue is just like, I don't even know what kind of blue I would classify it as, but it's just so bright that you're like, whoa. But it's not neon or glowing necessarily.
And for some reason, these very brightly colored sea monsters like still fit super well in their very realistic surroundings. Like I don't know how that happens, but it works.
How do they do that? Like, how do they look natural?
What is this? And speaking of the sea monsters, that's the other big thing. Like Red is, again, I wish I had stats on this, people. Like, I want to know how big Red is supposed to be. Like, how, compared to the characters, Red is huge.
She's huge.
Monstrously huge. This isn't just like a little dragon in How to Train Your Dragon. Like, I mean, honestly, it's probably comparative to the final beast in How to Train Your Dragon.
Right. That big dragon.
That big dragon that, like, oh my goodness. I should look up my notes for How to Train Your Dragon, see if I have that down. But like I would compare them. But instead of just at the end, it's like you're with Red the entire film. Okay, I just looked it up because I had to know. So the final like dragon monster, the Red Death of How to Train Your Dragon, is basically 1,000 feet long.
Love it.
Love it.
Not intimidating whatsoever.
Not at all. And of course that was over 10 years ago, but that was a huge feat. And now we have Red, who is just ginormous. Like I would argue that they are at least 1,000 feet.
Yeah, definitely.
Like just how huge Red is. And she is in the movie constantly the whole time. And it just it's a technical wonder, and it's beautiful, and like truly there weren't any moments in this film that I was super like, ooh, that looked bad. Like every shot was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I mean, from the setting to the shots to the character design, the characters were so fun. I loved how like different all the characters were. Like there were so many like shapes and sizes and the faces and jaw lines and I don't know, I just saw so much like diversity in shape. It was really cool. And that's another beautiful part about this show as well, is it's very diverse, which we love that, of course.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so refreshing. So any other specific like moments that you want to touch on that were your favorite, or anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I do want to say that the characters really make this show for me. And something that I really appreciate is that though the hunters have the appearance of pirates, they're not treated like pirates. Like, they're treated like, oh, these are the regular guys who take care of business and hunt down the sea monsters. And like, I mean, in comparison to the Royal Navy, they look haggard, but they're not like, I don't know, they're not off the charts, like doing their own, like they are doing their own thing, but they're not like so rogue as pirates are.
Yeah.
And
they're very much a part of this society. They have a place here.
Yeah, and they are working for the king and queen. And they look really ragged compared to like the Royal Navy because they're all in uniform and whatnot. But I like that their position, they look more like the common person. Like they're like the working class version, getting the job done. Yeah. And whereas like the Navy looks like the upper class version of getting stuff done, though they don't actually get the stuff done.
Right, yeah.
So
they just spend all of the money.
Right. So I just really appreciate that you have these characters who seem all BA and rogue, which they are, but like they're still working for the good of society.
Yes.
You know, and they're doing their part to make life better for everyone else.
Yeah.
I really love that.
Yeah.
As far as any other moments, I mean, I love the moment, you know, I talked about how Maisie is super fearless and she gets a bed on the ship and first mate Sarah Sharp shows her to her bed and like throws a bunch of weapons on the board or whatever. And Maisie's all like, oh my gosh, like you are Sarah Sharp. And she starts listing off all these things and she's just like, yeah, you can stop now. And like, she says something like really intense that should scare a kid away. And Maisie in response is just like, you are amazing. Yes. And I love her little connection with Maisie because that little bond eventually like plays out in the end as well, with Sarah also choosing to like stand up for what's right and learn that like, okay, maybe I have been wrong my whole life. And so I don't know, I think Maisie's kind of like a catalyst for her own softening in belief, and like maybe Sarah sees some of herself in Maisie too. So
yeah,
I just liked that little connection.
Oh, I like that a lot. And I love Sarah. She is like so BA and like the best, you know, first mate.
Yeah, she's awesome.
So good.
How about you?
You know, I would say like just my last final thoughts are just like, I really love how from the beginning Jacob and Maisie's both of their desires and their like motivations are very clear. Like Maisie wants to be a hunter. That's what she wants. She wants to be like her parents. And Jacob wants to become the captain of the ship. And by the end, they both have completely like foregone those dreams. And it's not in a negative way, you know? It's like you're allowed to change what you want to do. You're allowed to change your dream. And because you're along the way, your journey in life, like you can find better ones.
And they talked about being like a little family.
Exactly.
Because like Maisie was like, well, maybe we could go to this place and settle down. And Jacob's like, so like be a family? And like she's like, oh, don't get all like mushy with me. Like it's super cute. And
so yeah, at the very end there's the little like they're in their nice little cottage on their little dock and they're a little family. And it's super cute and it's very hopeful.
Right. Because dreams and desires change over time, and that's okay.
That's okay.
And sometimes it's good, like in this movie.
Exactly.
Changed perspective was good in this case.
Yes. So I really enjoy that little touch as well.
What a great film.
What a fantastic film.
So underrated.
Completely underrated. Please go watch it 1,000,000 times. Like, I'm just all warm and fuzzy inside. It's fantastic.
It's fun. You're going to get a good laugh out of it as an adult or a child. And also, it's, you know, got a deep message too.
Exactly. It has everything you could want.
Everything you could want. It's super fun.
Action, adventure, drama.
And warm and fuzzies.
And cute little blue monsters that you just want to squish.
Because let's be honest, we all love the cute little animals, even if they don't have a purpose in a film. Okay, let's be honest. We've all watched those movies where you're like, I have no idea why you're in this movie, but I somehow still love you. Like, yeah,
yes.
That's the point.
That's the point. The point is to have an animal sidekick. Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you so much for listening. To hear all of the bonus episodes that I am constantly throwing out into the ether. And to vote on episode topics, you can go to patreon.com/fanimated and become a member of the Fanimated crew. And kudos to everyone who already is a member of the Fanimated crew. You are the people who keep this show on the air. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Fanimated Podcast to stay up to date with all things animated. And don't forget to leave a rating and review telling us what you'd like us to watch next. I haven't seen any new ratings and reviews in the past few weeks, so I'd really love to see a few. Thank you. The music is written by Jamie Krause, and the art is done by myself. You can find my art Instagram at CandorDrop. And we will be back soon for animation discussion. So, in the meantime, stay tuned.
And stay animated. I still can't. Well, I love that it's not a Disney film because then they have they can be a little more like relaxed with the verbiage.
Yes.
I love it when like Captain Crow is just like, "You're never gonna be able to catch the monster with that ship. Also, your captain's an ass."
Oh my gosh! Yes.